Thank you very much for this interesting talk. Are there any comments, questions from the public?
I have a question. Sorry for being late, but maybe you said that. But I wondered if you have any archaeological evidence for work on Roman roads during the Anglo-Saxon period, like restoration, cleaning. You mentioned talking about the statutes of Roman roads, and these are material and testimonies from the texts. Do you have archaeological knowledge for that period to combine that, to get a full picture, not only text-based but archaeological-based? How's the situation there?
Yes. Archaeologically, a road is sometimes difficult to analyze because, especially a Roman road when it is well made. Some of those roads are still visible in England. You can go and visit them, and they will look very similar to how they looked 2,000 years ago when they were built. So there is a big debate among archaeologists when a Roman road is discovered. That's not only in England, obviously. How can we assess was this road in use after the end of the Roman period? There are isolated cases where we can archaeologically confirm, for example, remetalling of the surface. And we have some of those roads, mostly from southwestern England, where such remetalling has been confirmed archaeologically and dated relatively confidently to the Anglo-Saxon period. There is, one might hypothesize, again, a connection with how they were being used in Alfredian defense reforms. But we also know, to go outside of archaeology to answer your question, of legal obligations from later Anglo-Saxon England, from 9th, 10th and 11th centuries, that were part of the so-called trinoda necessitas, the tripartite obligation, in which it was stated that the local populace was required to maintain roads. And we know that Anglo-Saxons built their own. They are excluded from this analysis. There are particular terms that they used for them. Sometimes those terms overlap, which poses a problem when building a data set. But then we can use archaeology and narrative sources to cross-check it. So we know that Anglo-Saxons built also roads. But one can see, looking at that network, that in many places this was not necessary because the road was already there. And if we have a legal obligation, which is widespread, especially in the 10th centuries, of maintaining that road, then we can assume that at least some of them were.
Further questions? I have one or two. You said at the end that the charters are very nice to study because they are quite short. Is it normally only one folio, or how many can they have?
So normally, if we have the original document, let me bring that one into view. If we have the original document, it will occupy one sheet. They are even called in scholarship the so-called single sheets, because they will. This has to do with the performance around writing a charter. With this having to be a document that was sometimes, we don't know that from, we have no confirmation of that from England, but we know from the continent that, for example, a charter, it was important for it to be a single document because it would sometimes be laid on the altar of a local church after being drafted and signed in a performative act, sort of commending the transaction to God. So the single sheets, the original documents, will be in one piece, in one sheet, but the ones in cartularies will, of course, be in a codex. so the ones that we have from later copies, would be bound in a codex, and that would be a continuous text, where the scribe in 12th century, for example, copied the charters in the particular monastery or in the particular church, and the originals are lost to us, and we have just that copy, so that would be in a codex.
This brings me to my next question about lost charters. Have you an explanation why they have been lost, or?
There are various hypotheses towards that. Northumbrian charters are very often explained as that being due to Viking occupation. So, because we have so few of the charters that were in the Danelaw, in the region of Britain that's been under Viking authority, this is presumed that this might have had something to do with this. Monasteries in the north were burned, the cartularies and the original single sheets were burned with them sometimes. And because of those regions then passing into the Viking authority, the charters were not renewed by Anglo-Saxon kings. And then we have a few from the north, but they will start popping up when United Anglo-Saxon Kingdom coalesces in the 10th century. So there is there's also a hypothesis outside of the Anglo-Saxon period, and that would be William the Conqueror's harrying of the north. There was a big upraising against the Norman authority in the north, which was brutally suppressed by William the Conqueror after the Norman conquest. And we know from the descriptions of that suppression that documents were burned, that probably in a conscious act of wanting to have a clean slate. This, if I may, this touches also on distribution of the charters that we know. If we look at the point distribution again and that western region, yes, it was very highly Romanized. Yes, archaeologically we find a very rich villa landscape, Roman villa landscape there. There is hypothesis that for a long time post-Roman polities held there against Anglo-Saxons. And then when the Anglo-Saxons come there is this great redistribution of land. Because they want to have a new slate. There's a very big charter activity. This has been assumed for a while, but because this kind of analysis has not been done before, we couldn't really see that in comparison with other regions. And indeed, this might have to do with politics of power, because those grants appear in bursts and are very, very centered on places that we archaeologically know had been inhabited before the Anglo-Saxons conquered that area.
How do you extract the text from the transcriptions?
So for that, I've built, also in R, I've built a script that gathers the plain text for the ones that is available. And then in the R, using the tidy text packages, one can structure this text in the lack of text encoded text. This requires some tricks in teaching the script to recognize, for example, estate locations when we need the metadata for localizing, or recognizing where the witness lists are, which is possible through tags in the text. So in a way, I tag and encode the text for the purposes of it. but I do so, the script does so to speak, on the fly. So for the, which has to do with, of course, as we know, with the way R functions and R, in the way R structures data. If in my database, apart from the stuff I extract from it, which would be the metadata, I also keep the Latin or Anglo or the English full text. So I can search for phrases there. So R doesn't have dictionaries like Python, but it does have the ability to work in a similar way. So that's, for example, how I extract the phrases used for Roman roads.
And what's the mapping basis for the Roman roads that existed? Is there?
So this English Heritage, which has a database available on the internet, which one can use. I've collaborated for a while with Briggs from England, a mathematician who did amazing things for Roman roads on his personal website, sort of in free time. He's a mathematician and statistician who works on this. But the basis for that is the so-called Madhuri Catalog. It was a chap who, in the 1950s, wrote a handbook of the Roman roads known from the archaeological record that is still being updated with new archaeological finds. This poses some problems for R because it's and for the mapping there, it's a question of how it finds the path. So at the beginning there were some artifacts that had to be removed from it and some manual labor involved with it.
So there's also some interpolation involved in
yes.
Yeah. The road is as a road and not only
as a road is not a list of points. The way it usually works with the English Heritage database, the English Heritage database has point where a road has been confirmed archaeologically, and then we calculate the shortest possible distance. Those points are usually very dense, so. This is the not enriched one. This is just the bare English heritage, including some of the military tracks in Scotland that Romans built during their abortive campaigns there. There's much less stuff. Like the way Wales looks very bare here, but it looks very bare due to the fact that the database is not well set. Not that because there were so few roads there. So one has to be fully aware of the fact that this, because we have to use different databases, that's a project that would have to be well funded, but it's well needed to have a digital Madhuri catalog, which would have dense point distribution that could be used for that. But that's beyond the capabilities of a single person to maintain it.
One last question, how do you deal with forgeries if you do statistics?
Yes, so the database includes so I have, those are the last 4 columns. For the charters where I could find that they have been addressed in any way in scholarship as forged, authentic, or debatable, I have gathered this information and tried to calculate for each document towards authentic or towards forged, where on the spectrum numerically between 0 and 1 we can look at this. And every document has this information. And then I can, for example, if we look at this, those charters popping in on the map of England, those are only the charters with high authenticity factor. The factor where we have that above, where the trustworthiness and confidence in the document is above 0.75.
I have another question. Can you, let's say, compare the layout of the Roman network, street network, and the Anglo-Saxon which is, I mean, you said, and one gets the impression that they reused a lot of infrastructure, which makes on the one hand the impression that they used what they found. And it would be interesting also to see what did they change. So where did they needed new roads, or where did roads deliberately being misused because they were not used? So how does the network change, for instance, due to new cities emerging or other needs or other communication? So did you have any, just basically have an overlay of the Anglo-Saxon and the Roman network and see the differences? So how does it change, and what does it tell about the different infrastructures?
So this is a fascinating topic. I would love to do that. I don't have full confidence that we have enough data for this to be done for the whole of England. There may be regions where we have enough archaeological excavations data to see where the Anglo-Saxon roads, where the roads built by the Anglo-Saxons are. There's a study by Cooper about the development of road network in Britain from roughly 8th century to the 1400s. He did some maps there, but not many. It is just simply very difficult to do. On a regional level, for example in Kent, I think it would be doable. It would require a lot of work because, for example, the Anglo-Saxon archaeological data is not so easily available as the Roman one. So it would require first compiling this, the point database, and for example, it will not be so dense, the point distribution of those. Yeah, so with the Roman roads, we know with most of those elements that they don't run through places through which a road cannot run. Yeah, because the points are dense enough to know that. With Anglo-Saxon ones, where we have that from excavations, that would be a stretch of 10 meters that has been found, and that's it. We would be able to use charters to help us with it, because those roads are there. But as I said, this would be only available on a very small scale, very regional.
Any more questions? Well, then I have a last question, and don't feel urged to answer while being filmed, but you can answer the question as well later on. Is you reused research data, existing digital research data. Was it as well licensed as being reusable, or did you just say, okay, the data is here, I take it and I use it for my own project?
No, absolutely. I of course talk with people who work with this. The exception being when I use stuff which is freely available for research purposes, like the English heritage database, where one has to register the project that uses that data. And the other exception is being when I enrich the existing stuff with editions of charters that have been done in the 19th century, which are in free open access data. Those are editions from 1840s, where sometimes I have manually, where I've noticed that there are exceptions, but those are in open access. When we're talking about using the data that exists here, obviously one has to talk with the people who work with the project and cooperate with them. Some of that data is released on open access in Creative Commons attributions. But some of that data isn't because of the way the funding was done. And for example, then I couldn't use it. This is why I had to sometimes, in some cases, use the 1840s books and manually add the charters to the database because of the way some of those projects were funded. Which is also an interesting thing for discussion for us as digital humanists. It does not allow, even if the authors of the project would love to do that, it does not allow them to freely make the data available. And then even though there is an easily accessible text, I had to do it myself.
So, I thank you very much for your talk, which was quite interesting for me. And I thank you for participating in this year's Digital Classicist seminar.